Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Wrestling Underground podcast. I am your host, as always, Chad Porto. Joining me is the glorious one himself, Marcus Green. Marcus, how the heck are you?
Good. Full plate tonight.
Yeah?
Yep.
Hopefully the internet is stabilized. It's had some issues earlier, but it seems to be running well now. Just like the Nuggets, who were down by like a good 9 points last I checked, and now they're up by 2. Looks like LeBron's getting swept-a-roo.
Oh, they losing like that because I seen one clip where Eddie Murphy was at a game and I think left at the beginning of the fourth quarter in the middle of it.
Yeah, that sounds about right from what you'd expect from Eddie Murphy. He seems like a fair weather fan kind of guy. But speaking of guys, we got to say goodbye to one of the greatest, Superstar Billy Graham. We heard last week that he had some issues that were coming to fruition and that his time was limited. And then Wednesday, he ended up passing away. Arguably one of the greatest speakers of all time. He was the progenitor for a lot of modern wrestling figures because a lot of the time, like back when he was a guy, wrestlers looked more like Sheik, Bob Backlund, and Bruno Sammartino with more sizable bodies, but not defined bodies. But Superstar upped the ante and became about the physique, the bodybuilder physique, and his commentary and his interview prowess. Not original, obviously. I think Gorgeous George was the first one to really embrace that idea. Was revolutionary in a lot of ways because he upped the ante in the eyes of some. And there's a very good contingent of people that if you ask them, Superstar is the only reason that guys like Hulk Hogan exist at this point in time. So I think he was 79, or 80. So it's not one of those where we're sitting there like, oh man, like another one gone too soon. This is just kind of like this happens. This is life. Eventually people end up passing away, and it's an unfortunate thing, but it's a real thing. And to get 80-odd years, 80-plus years in, I think we can all want at least a semblance of that. So, it's sad to say goodbye to Superstar, but at least we're not sitting here talking about another 38-year-old dead. So
yeah, man. Yeah, you hate to hear it, but life is gonna life. And he certainly lived one year before my era, but certainly a legend in everything you said, and all. So like you said, it's a progenitor for so many things that we see in today. In an era where the rules, stakes, and just landscape was just completely different than what we get now. So that speaks to even speaks to a different level of work ethic and what he was able to do in his era. So yeah, like you said, we're not they're gone too soon thing is gets said, but at that age, he did, like I said, he lived a life, and he be at peace now. But like we said, last week, thoughts and prayers to the family and obviously across the industry because it's another legendary loss.
It is. And eventually we're going to have this conversation again with somebody else. So it's just good to remind people of who came before and what's happening next. Guys like Billy Graham are very rare. So go back, watch some of his promos, watch some of his matches, and kind of get to know who he was because he was pretty impressive. And Marcus, he was before my time as well. I think that's fair to say.
No, absolutely.
Because you're like, yeah, he's before my time. I'm like, Marcus, he's before our time. I'm not that much older than you. Speaking of older, I thought that when we hit a certain age, we wouldn't have to worry about stories like this because we're in our 30s. Well, Marcus, you're about to hit 30, aren't you?
I'll be 32 next month, man.
Oh, that's right. You're already into your 30s. Welcome to the club. It is not fun. Speaking of things that aren't fun, apparently Thunder Rosa's sick and tired of Britt Baker being a bitch. My words, not hers. According to Covalent Television, Covalent TV, the Covalent TV on Twitter, Thunder Rosa went on Busted Open Radio and talked about the injury that's kept her on the shelves for so long, and also talking about her struggles with mental illness and mental health, I should say, that have been exacerbated by people making comments on social media and the like. She says, quote, "It's a process. You have no control over it. When it comes with when it comes with health, you have no control over it. For so many nights, I really kicked myself in the head, and I was like, I should have just done one more match and just let it all out. If I got hurt more, whatever. But it wasn't that one time. And when I decided to do something because of my health, and I decided to make that decision, and I didn't know what the consequences were going to be and how people were going to react. I was just thinking about my own physical health, and at the time everything was happening, I was not in a good mental state as well. I was trying to hide a lot of stuff because I was having some personal issues, and just being on top exacerbates everything that is happening in your life. So I just feel like no matter what you do, you are always being criticized, and you are always, nothing is ever good enough. You're always doing something wrong, and I feel like you put a loop over it, and it just like magnifies everything. And being under that kind of pressure was very difficult, and not having time to just really let it go, because sometimes when people get injured, they take time off, and people are cool and they're not saying anything, they're not feeling attacked. But I feel like when that happened, not only knowing I would have to relinquish something that I worked really hard for, it was hard enough, but adding all the other levels of things on social media, the constant asking what's going on, like if you're really injured or not, that really hurt even more. It made things more significant. It made things much more difficult than they were mentally for me. There were days that I'm going to be honest, said on my YouTube channel, I wanted to kill myself. Everything stopped, and there's nothing you can do, and I'm so thankful that I have a really good team and a really good family. My son, I think he's the one who's helped me the most, and he helped me many times, many nights, just telling me everything's going to be okay. And I was lucky enough to have some resources, and I was able to be in therapy. There were not good sessions. There was a lot of crying, and there was a lot of letting things go and accepting things that you cannot change, and we're just moving forward. Now, this could mean very many things to very different people, but considering the most vocal name who has been trashing Thunder Rosa since she got injured a year plus ago, maybe even longer, you know, we think, and I think, specifically I think, Marcus may agree, but I have not asked him, but I think this is in direct reference to Britt Baker, who has spent time in the media, time on social media, now time on this new behind-the-scenes show, talking about whether or not she thinks Thunder Rosa is actually hurt, and then going on to say things like, even if she is, I don't think I did anything wrong, because I'm just asking questions and all this hubbubaloo. Marcus, do you think this is directed towards Britt Baker?
Yeah, I mean, it's the safest, one of the safest of some. Obviously, we assume because we don't know, her from a pack of grits. But yeah, I mean, you would have to. She, like you said, she was the loudest antagonist in this whole thing in terms of speaking out about Rosa's situation and whatnot. Certainly all over social media. Even really before this show came out, which really comes at basically feels insult to injury at this point. I would imagine even long before that. Rosa has to have some friends in that company, so stuff had to be getting back to her. Probably even before some stuff even touched social media. So there's a whole thing about it. You just it sucks, but there is no age limit on the concept of bullying, or just like you said, just being a jackhole. So, but yeah, this got to be in direct reference to that. Of course, obviously she's trying to remain professional and not want to stir the pot anymore, particularly because it's dealing with her health, so her mental health. But I also think this kind of opened the door leading to therapy for some other stuff that she probably hadn't unpacked or had buried, or some stuff that probably propelled a lot of her feelings in and or around this situation. So it probably ended up helping her in a lot of ways, because when you go to therapy, you probably unpack a lot of stuff that you think is the problem, but then it's stuff behind that that's really prevalent. So
Here is what Britt Baker said when she was on the Busted Open radio show. I have a very workhorse mentality where I want to be at work. As soon as I'm done with Dynamite, I get on a plane and go to the dental office. Thanks for the teeth cleaning, Britt. I can't relate to the mentality of where you don't want to be at work, where you tell everyone you're the champion. I'll be honest, I've asked her the same question twice, and she doesn't have an answer for me either. It's not that I want her to work hurt or that I don't believe in her injury. There is none of that. Just why? Why not come to the locker room where you're the champion when you can? You have people like Adam Cole who couldn't travel, who couldn't leave the house for weeks. It was a huge milestone when he could take a walk up and down the street with his head injury. That is what I don't understand. People don't have to agree. That's fine. I'm a bold and stubborn individual, and I stand by what I said. So Britt Baker's a bully who has no problem driving someone to suicidal thoughts. Britt, you'll never hear this show, but if you do, just know that I fucking hate you. You are not cool. You're not tough. You're not someone that I think should be a role model. I don't think this is kitschy. I don't think this is cute. This is not a storyline. When somebody says, I'm thinking about killing myself, that's not a storyline. That's Scott Hall, alcoholic 1998 WCW storyline levels of gross. In fact, if this whole thing was a storyline, Marcus, I would vomit because of how disgusting using mental health as a stupid pro wrestling storyline would be. So I don't think this is a work. I don't think we're getting worked. I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm not afraid to be a rube. I'm not afraid to be a mark. What I am afraid of is that people like Britt Baker get emboldened by this AEW fan base, and she's out here driving people to think about suicide. And to me, it feels like she's undercutting a lot of her behavior. Like, oh, I'm just asking questions. Are you, though? Because no one's ever accused me of making them feel like killing themselves, because when I ask them questions, it's usually just once and going, oh, okay. Because it turns out Britt doesn't own the company. Thunder Rosa doesn't owe her answers. Who is Britt Baker besides Adam Cole's fuck buddy? I don't understand what her involvement in the company is, and for her to have to take the stance like, well, I'm just asking questions. You're not the fucking bookers. You don't pay the fucking talent. You don't get her on planes, pay her money, and tell her what to do. You have zero say over her functionality. So for her to sit here and say, I'm just asking, who the fuck asked you to? You're not an EVP. Your husband or boyfriend or whatever he is isn't an EVP. Just because all of you are tight with the new click elite, if you will, doesn't mean that you have any actual authority. Honest to goodness, I want this bitch fired if this is true. If Britt Baker's harassing talent to the point of thinking about suicide, she should be fired. It's not cute. It's not kitschy. You don't do this shit. It's fucked up. And the fact that like Thunder Rosa's mental health has not been a new thing. Like if you've ever followed her career dating back to her time with Combatis Americas when she was doing her MMA fight, or before then when she was in the NWA, or even before that when she was in Lucha Underground, she's talked about this before. This isn't new. I feel like Tony Khan really needs to get his shit together, because people are going to start dying under his watch. And then what? You know, I know Luke Harper, or what was his name in AEW?
Brody Lee.
Brody Lee. I know Brody Lee died in AEW, but that wasn't because of any mental illness. It's because he had a chronic genetic condition where his lungs just died. That's not on Tony Khan. But if Thunder Rosa were to kill herself because of Britt Baker's constant harassment, yeah, that'd be on him. 100% on him.
It's more direct that we did almost see Guevara kill a Hardy on TV.
Yeah, he almost killed Matt Hardy. And then Sammy Guevara almost died because Rebby Hardy is still a living, breathing, functioning individual in society.
Don't play about a man.
No. And listen, Matt looks like a cross-eyed goose. And the fact that he landed a hottie like her, and she's so defensive of him, I would never stand in the way of those two. Like, holy hell. That is not something I want to get used to.
She's as nuts as she is hot, and that's a rare Well, probably rather me in certain other people's neck of the woods. They're like, no, my God, that's a Monday over here. But
I mean, I've dated nutser. More nuts? I've dated
yeah,
crazier.
nuts, sir. Yeah, that's a photo word, nuts, sir.
Nutser. Yeah, a little bit of a nutser. But yeah, Britt Baker at the very least should apologize for this because this is fucked up.
Yeah, and she's not gonna apologize
No,
because there's
God
a
no.
certain level of ingrained arrogance that comes with those comments. And it sucks. Like I said, the only thing the silver lining here to me is the fact that this drove Thunder Rosa to therapy, and this is probably coming off like I assume this is her first time. Like you said, she's had a long um stint throughout years with mental health, as I would imagine most performers do. And certainly on a woman who goes as hard as she does. One thing this certainly proves, and like you said, this could be one of those long term works, but I doubt that it is because she's always come off as you know a specific amount of authentic. But like I think this probably put her in position to really get deep into some stuff that probably only aided in causing so much anxiety and worration around this whole situation. Like this, when you was reading off that quote, I was like, this probably put her in position to kind of really prioritize because you hate to hear about anybody having suicidal thoughts, um, but particularly when it's people who have kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So the hear that it was her kid that helped her through this um, is a really cool thing. Like I said, this is going off that it probably helped her kind of prioritize some things where she can be passionate about her craft, but not put it over her person and her actual life where she has people that love and depend on her for outside of the business. So hopefully that's the silver lining here. And getting back to Baker, just looking at that show, that reality show, she apparently went through a lot because I think she was their first champion. And she went through a lot from her perspective, both in terms of the load that she had took on, and then also I guess the backlash she received on social media. And in her mind, she very much persevered and toughed it out, and um, from her perspective, it exuded a certain level of grit and toughness and leadership that I'm guessing she views as the standard now. And she holds everybody else to, or specifically people who aren't directly her friends, that she could either gaslight or prop up. So that's weird. Look, you can't tell people how to grieve. You can't tell people how to lead. There's different ways to do everything. Everybody got their own processes. And a lot of that stuff that she boasts about doing when she was champion was choices she made. And Rosa was in a different position, and a lot of stuff that she did was a lot of stuff that she didn't do because she had a lot of stuff going on. So, like, she really does come off like a jackhole here, having in her mind a set standard. Because what she's ultimately questioning is that woman's work ethic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that sucks because there's one thing just witnessing her as a performer that most people I would imagine to me can't question is that woman's work ethic. You see what she does in the ring. You see how hard she goes, just with her wrestling gear, and you read or listen to interviews how passionate she is, and then you see this, and this tells you all you need to know about her passion. The fact that something like this affected her deeply, where some other people were kind of just like, well, I can't do nothing about it, and companies are gonna do what they do, and I'm not in control of that, so kind of just got to let go and let have. But no, everything you said, she is talking like she's in position like Tony Khan, and this is another thing, much like this whole CM Punk drama and all the Bucks and all that whole thing, and where it's like the fish rots at the head. You need to get this stuff and your performance under a certain level of protocol when it comes to this stuff, because letting people have a certain amount of freedom does not bode well when they're not the leader. You're the leader. You got to set different pace. Like, this does not look good on his company's PR aesthetic. And the fact that we're talking about, like you said, I mean, in certain instances, she will be fired other places. But I've been saying for the longest, looking at this whole thing, like it'd probably be best if Rosa leaves. Also, there's unfinished business, and they could very well turn this into a work storyline wise, without which I also would be sour on because it's like it's just pissy. I don't want to see Britt benefiting from this in any way. She's already benefiting from it from the flat scans that kiss AEW's ass in general. But yeah, it's just a sour situation all around. I just hope Rosa is on the better end of this because with her seemingly coming back to the company now, it's it's only going to continue to be a thing, particularly if there's no um sort of recompense in terms of Britt looking at this and trying to take some type of accountability. But again, she's like, I'm not questioning her mental health, I'm questioning her work ethic. So
And whether it's mental health or work ethic or whatever, it's one of those things where neither of it needs to be questioned. And mostly specifically because this is a job. And I hate people that try to do this, well, it's like a cult. Like you should do this, and if you don't really feel this way, then you should. No, it's a fucking job that you're destroying your body for. I never understood the argument for like, well, Goldberg never liked the business, so fuck him. It's like, who cares? He entertained you. Like that's his job. He's not going to work for free. No one should have to work for free. So like all this, miasma that Britt's spewing, it's nonsense. It's disgusting. She's a dentist, for Christ's sakes, who is out there, undermining another human being. And for what? To boost her own self-esteem because people liked her more than Britt? Because Britt had the, had a tough time early on in the company? Like whatever the reason is, it's not right. And like if you were 22, I'd make space for you, right? Like there'd be that opportunity for like, listen, you're 20, you're 18, you're 14, you're a stupid twat, right? Everyone's a stupid twat at that age. Everyone. But Britt Baker's what, 30? At least? Let's look this up. She is 32 years old. She has a doctorate in dental something. She's not she can't do dental surgery. She's the other one. And she's out here trying to be a mean girl, but for real. Fuck her. At this point in life, you are who you are. Fuck her. That's my final say on that.
Sorry, Britt, for all the emphasis and pride you take in being a dentist. You are very much a bad tooth.
Yeah, you're a rotten tooth, Brett. You are bad candy, man. Speaking of bad candy, even Ric Flair thinks Cody Rhodes got done wrong. And Ric Flair is like, I will bob and kneel for Vince McMahon. Like, this dude is like, I will do whatever it takes to make Vince happy. I am a Vinceaholic. Rick's obsession with Vince is disgusting, but that's a whole different issue.
Yeah.
Again, on the Busted Open radio show, Ric Flair was asked about, should Cody have been the one to dethrone Roman Reigns? And he goes, yes and yes. I think he's performing at a level right now. He had 2 matches with Seth Rollins that really put him in a different place. I knew he could work in a way that we've all known him for years, but the 2 matches with Seth Rollins he had were off the hook. Yeah, I was in shock when he didn't win it at WrestleMania 39. But, nobody knows what's going to happen and who's making the right decision. This comes at a time when guys like Bully Ray, Road Dogg, I think maybe Tommy Dreamer, and other vets of the business are like, no. I think even Freddie Prinze Jr. maybe. No, Freddie Prinze Jr. Was asked about who should win the World Heavyweight title. All these people are being asked about, like, hey, was Cody losing the right thing? And everyone's like, yeah, Cody losing was the right thing. And here's Flair going, no. And fans very much don't agree with the assumption that it was the right thing for him to lose. Many are like, no. Cody should have won. Marcus, do you think Ric Flair's comments about Cody winning will have any merit to the conversation, or do you think it's already too late, too little, and no one really cares at this point?
It's too late, too little. And certain fans are just going to be 100% on board with it because a lot of people just are on the Cody bandwagon of it all. But ultimately, I think they went with the right decision. One, because they are, like I said, a lot of what comes with Reigns, like he's been must see since he started the whole tribal chief thing. He's probably the most consistently viewed thing in terms of high quality storyline that the company has. Undoubtedly, he's the reason why SmackDown is the better show overall, despite Raw obviously being always touted as the A show. And between that, how much they still are clearly getting out of the whole bloodline storyline, and the fact that we know the company is obsessed with numbers. So if it came to a point where he could potentially get to 1,000 days or a certain number beyond that or break some type of record, we know how the company is about that kind of stuff. They do it all the time with far less and less talented names. So, um, and it was smart as a third thing that it would have came off like Cody had kind of basically got it too easy. Like he came back and he won the Rumble, yeah, from the 31st spot. If you can't win it from the 31st spot, that speaks to a whole nother level of, I guess, ineptitude in a way. But it kind of almost felt like he got it too easy, and he came back as the poster child, the golden child that was just gonna come back and dethrone the great, Samoan emperor, and it didn't happen. That's not how it works. But I guess looking at it from a fourth angle, ultimately he fell victim to the larger storyline at play too, because this whole thing started with family essentially on the Samoan side, and it kind of got to end that way. I think ultimately during that whole storyline, Cody kind of said it. Like once you don't have all that you built around you in terms of the bloodline, and you're on your island of irrelevancy alone, you're gonna be a chief without a tribe, and then something else he said. But once that kind of falls around him, that title is all but gone. So it's just depending on who they drop it to. So, yeah, Flack can have his opinion, and certainly he's had a plethora over the years. And like you said, it's interesting him kind of, I guess, going against Vince McMahon booking, considering the fact that how far he supplanted his head up that man's posterior over the years. But yeah, he's entitled to his opinion, but I don't think it's going to attach to the larger conversation. I just think there's a divide. You got the Romanites and I guess the Cody files.
The come back to me. I'll come up with something. Speaking of coming up with something, former LAX manager, TNA, WCW, ECW star Conan doesn't understand how WWE is currently booking LA Knight and Karrion Kross. On the Keeping It 100 podcast, he said, "I don't know why you'd have a guy when it's so hard to get people over who is over, and you haven't even pushed him. There are so many great things you can do to make money with him. Why you wouldn't take advantage of him and try to take his knees out?" And I could see him be as universal. I could see him as universal champion if they gave him a proper push. We've seen them do that, and they want to. Why not world champion? And this is talking about Knight specifically. As far as Karrion Kross, he says, the type of employees you have, and Kross, is not that type that he has heat. He's a model employee. He's the type of guy you want. He has ideas. He's not just waiting around for you to give him ideas. He stays in shape. He's sharp on his promos and characters. Yeah, he's not one of these AJ Styles, but he can still go. He's just one good storyline away from exploding. Now, we've talked before about the failures with Eli Drake, specifically LA Knight. Do you think LA Knight is a world championship guy or a WWE championship guy in WWE? Same question for Karrion Kross. Do they have the same ceiling? Or do you think one is better off than the other?
I feel like in terms of mic ability, it's few touching Eli. I mean, LA. But we already know that's always been his shtick, if you will. That's been one of his greatest things is him on the mic. I feel like I definitely agree with Conan. They certainly could be booking them both better. They feel like they Karrion so needed to get back to whatever resemblance he had of when he was in NXT. When he was, just this dominant force that was killing everything. But because they went so left with him with like looking like a bad Ninja Turtle villain gimmick, they kind of wanted to get him back to a level of normalcy, and they did. Unfortunately, it's a medium now between what he was in NXT and um, that bondage thing, because now he's just come off as a normal guy, and it feels like, just from my perspective, that they've given him the old Bray Wyatt stick of he starts fights that he can't finish.
Mhm.
You know, when it comes to LA Knight, yeah, it really kind of comes off similar. They went so far left with the Max Dupree thing, finally got him back to a level of normalcy. Then he ran into the whole thing with Bray, which he was coming off well at, and then he ran into a wall with that Mountain Dew match, and it kind of feels like he's just kind of been tumbling ever since. Like they don't know what to do with him really. But in terms of them both being world champions, I feel like there's a high ceiling with Drake to do something, or at least be in more contention than Cross. That's just me coming at it from a Mike level, because at this point, all Karrion Kross is like brooding stares and TikTok. With Scarlett by his side. But I feel like Drake could find himself in that title picture more. But they both are definitely guys that will compete for the U.S. and the Intercontinental, and find themselves in positions to be contenders, like in Money at the Bank scenarios and potential scramble matches. But I don't know about specific champions at this point. I think Cross might have peaked in NXT as champion, and I don't know with Drake, because obviously he didn't get that in NXT. But I just feel like there's a little bit, if they do right by Knight, he could have a better longevity. But they definitely being booked in the middle right now, and it's not really benefiting either of them, because it's making them forgettable.
I think it's very apropos that Karrion Kross is struggling, only because of the way he left Impact, and just there's some bitterness still there. I would have to imagine. But the one thing I do want to point out, bitterness from me specifically, the one thing I do want to point out is that Karrion was a member before he was anyone. Was a member of Jeff Jarrett's Global Force Wrestling promotion and was pegged to be the guy. Like, they had Nick Aldis at the top, but they put Karrion in a lot of big positions very early in his career, because this is like 2014, 2015 when he's just starting out. So clearly a lot of very smart people seem to be very high in Karrion Kross. So I could see him winning a title eventually. Maybe not in the WWE, because that company doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. But if you were to give me LA Knight and Karrion Kross to be my headliners for 2 years, I guarantee I could build you something special. So the fact that the WWE can't, really indicative of how poorly they are built. But this isn't new, Marcus, because this is 20 years ago, 19 years ago, when Kurt Angle took on Booker T. Now, there's two quotes that we're going to talk about. The first one is Kurt reveals that his program with Booker T, apparently it was 2005, so 18 years ago, was one of his least favorite things that he's ever done. I'm pretty sure it wasn't 2005, though, Chief, because he was on Raw for most of 2005. Hang on. Okay, we're going to look this up. Booker T versus Kurt Angle. We're going to throw in that, and we're going to see what we get.
But that had to happen on SmackDown, right?
Yeah, because Book didn't leave SmackDown until maybe 2006 when he became King Booker. Well, apparently they did fight at Judgment Day, because I know Kurt went over to Raw right after that, because he was on Raw like late summer, because they were doing Angle versus Cena. So apparently they did feud in 2005. So my bad. I was incorrect on that one. Well, the storyline saw Kurt become obsessed with Sharmell, leading to the infamous promo that we always talk about. Kurt Angle looking into the camera going, Booker, I want to have sex with your wife. I want to have rough, hard, bestiality sex. And Mark is like, wait, what? Did he mean interracial? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and this was before Perk Angle, correct?
Yes. Or at least during Perk Angle, because Perk Angle went for a long time. Perk Angle had no limits. He goes on to say, I totally regret the feud. I didn't want any part of it. Even though I got to wrestle Booker, I'd rather not wrestle Booker than do what I had to do with Sharmell. Because I think there's also some physicality with Sharmell. He had to rough her up on screen. See. On a recent episode of the Kurt Angle Show, he explained that the WWE took chances with him, creatively speaking, as they knew that they could rely on him. That's why he was given a versatile range of programs. However, he wasn't always a fan of everything he was asked to do, noting that the storyline with Booker and his wife was the worst of them all. Vince, and that is the thing you need to know for some reason, wanted me to be a pervert. And Kurt goes on to say that he believes that he was given this romantic interest in Sharmell because he has a propensity for dating black women. He then goes on to say, in a different article, but same podcast, quote, "I have so much respect for Booker T and Sharmell. I love them dearly. And to do this program to have to do this program was completely brutal for me. If I were Booker, I would have beaten my ass," Angle joked before noting that he and Booker have never even spoken about the program, despite spending plenty of time with each other over the years. When it comes to the infamous bestiality line, Kurt says what we all knew. That was Vince. When Vince has his mind on something, he sees it through to the end. It wasn't just us that were uncomfortable. Everybody was uncomfortable. Everybody was stunned about this angle. Marcus, this is like arguably like when we talk about like Kurt Angle, outside of his issues with addiction, because I think he had like 2 DUIs. Outside of that, when we talk about Kurt, this is probably the worst non-personal life thing we can ever think of. Like, Kurt really doesn't have a lot of duds in his resume. And it actually speaks to the value of who he is as a competitor and as an entertainer. But this is clearly, unless I'm wrong, like maybe you can like cite like a big show feud that was probably worse. But I generally can't think of anything else that was worse than this storyline. Can you, when it comes to Kurt Angle?
When it comes to Kurt, no. Storylines overall, we could probably, go a whole nother hour listing off stuff that was trash. But yeah, in terms of the poor taste of it all, not at all surprised it was Vince. The stuff that gets that man excited or off or whatever when it comes to stuff that we've gotten on screen and whatnot is just it knows no bounds. He deliberately always overcooks his grits when it comes to stuff. From that piques his entertainment value for him. But no, man, Kurt never missed. I mean, just looking at this again, it's ironic that you bring up Big Show because Kurt reminds me of Big Show in the fact of he did everything he was asked to the best of his ability, no matter how ludicrous that it was and how much it was a detriment to him as a character. More so Big Show than Angle because obviously Angle was just a different tier wrestler. But this is another instance where Vince threw out cocky-making and stuff like this. One, there were 3 ways. One, because it just got him off. 2, because he knew Kurt wouldn't say no, but he also knew 3, that Kurt would probably get it over in some kind of way. Because, it's insane that you can divide Kurt's career up in terms of like an absolute stud in the ring, like one of the best to ever do it. But his entertainment value is insane, and that's going all the way back to when he was, that young gunner up and newcomer on Raw with his obsession with milk and of the like. So it's it don't surprise me. I do appreciate the fact that it literally made everybody's skin crawl except Vince, obviously. And some kind of way, we still got entertained by it, which again speaks to Kurt's just, if I got to go, I'm going to dive head first in all the way and go with it. But, yeah, man, it just sucks that, it's the leader of the company kind of throwing away, disregard, obviously, for the, people involved, because obviously this is to do with a woman, somebody's wife. And it's just in poor taste. But 9 times out of 10, if it's in poor taste, it's probably one of the first things Vince is going to recommend. Certainly back then. But this was certainly an era because none of this would even be remotely said now. Certainly not in the way that they got said, back then.
While I'm not a fan of what was said, and I think we can all agree on that, there's a part of me that wishes we could go back to 2004, 2005. Because you could do more things like you mentioned. And while I wouldn't do Kurt cutting a borderline racist promo about having sex with Sharmell and dubbing her a beast, an animal, because she's, black, that's That's gross. I do miss a lot of the elements that SmackDown and Raw had. They weren't overloaded. There was like a clear-cut definition of the top guys, the upper guys, the mid guys, the lower guys, and the curtain jerkers, right? And it was very simple. It was very engaging. And you weren't inundated with 60 fucking hours of wrestling by 40 fucking different companies. So I do miss a little bit of the 05, 04 WWE. You know, even the 06. Love the brand split. Love the creativity that people were forced to kind of dive into to keep things fresh and whatnot. But like this, the Katie Vick stuff, like we didn't need those things, right? So not everything was great, obviously. But I don't want to make it feel like the Ruthless Aggression era was always this. It had this.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always this. There were some very solid storylines in this era.
No, absolutely. And I think it would be nice to find a happy medium once again, because stuff like that far better executed, mind you, because like we said, we ain't championing what was said, because this is, was coming from the evil mind of the same guy that thought it was a good idea to go on TV and say the N-word and try to play it up for laughs. But there's a happy medium to be found, because that was also in the era where it was a rare thing for the workplace romances, certainly on screen anyway. It worked for Booker and Sharmell, but now there's, how many, there's more wrestlers dating and being married to each other than ever. Certainly out in the open now, so that stuff could kind of play far better. And it's loosely referenced here and there these days, depending tongue-in-cheek with a lot of stuff sometimes. Some certain people stay away from it, other people's, dive into it. But like I said, it's kind of one of those things, like it's not what you do, is how you do it. And then there's a way to do it now, because like half of Triple H's storyline, his career comprised of people crapping on his relationship with his wife. So, there was a way to do that. But you gotta give it to Kurt. He took stuff that shouldn't have worked in any capacity, and he put that Kurt Flair on it, and turned it into something memorable. Maybe not in the best taste, but memorable.
Speaking of best taste, let's talk about AEW. Apparently, they rehired Ace Steel, but then denied it, and now talent are surprised about this. Now, who to believe, we have no idea. Several reports came out that said that they rehired Ace Steel. For those of you who know him from his work on the Indies, he was one of the Second City Saints with him, Colt Cabana, CM Punk back in Ring of Honor. He was Donald Trump in that disastrous Donald Trump-Rosie O'Donnell match on Raw all those years ago. Very smart mind, very intelligent wrestler. And he got hired by AEW to be a producer. And then he was a part of the CM Punk promos before the infamous All Out match. And then, when the EVPs kicked open the door and injured an animal, Ace Steel and Kenny Omega tussled, and apparently Ace Steel bit Kenny Omega. He was fired for that, even though the EVP started it, so what are you going to do? And apparently, according to several different sources, he was since rehired and has been working at home. And a lot of the issues with CM Punk returning to TV or not stem around Punk wanting Ace Steel at television, allegedly, so that he could have somebody he trusts producing his segments. Now, the top talent here are quote-unquote surprised at the reports that he's back with the company, and AEW themselves have said no, he's not, that he hasn't been rehired as a producer, but they specifically say producer, so maybe they're kind of pulling the wool over people's eyes, so to speak. What I'll say is this: AEW needs to get their shit together, Marcus. I know I usually ask you for your opinion, my friend, but on this one, there doesn't need to be a second opinion, because we both agree they need to get their shit together. Tony Khan runs the business. He's the owner. He's the one that gets to final say. So fucking have final say. Tell the children it's time for bedtime and that they don't get to set the rules anymore. Because until that day comes, until he's willing to say, I don't give a shit if you go to the WB. Go. You'll be just like everyone else over there. Go. Until that day comes, this shit's going to keep happening. He still never should have been fired. Because executive vice presidents of a company, of a multi-million-dollar company, should not be looking to fight the employees. I don't know why that is such a fucking hard concept to grasp, and I don't know why AEW continues to be so goddamn mismanaged. Either Tony Khan needs to pull a Elon Musk and hire some type of CEO or CFO or what have you, and have them run the company with a goddamn iron fist, or he needs to just fucking close up shop because the nonsense going on in this company is ridiculous. I don't want another WWE. I don't know why we have another WWE. I'm sick of one company's nonsense. I don't need another. Marcus, we're moving the fuck on because I'm so fucking over this shit. That's a mini rant. A little mini rant. Marcus, do you remember when Macho Man was in TNA?
The real one or the black one?
Real one, but the black one's pretty good too. So the real one was in TNA. He was in TNA for about 2 months, not even. He made his debut at the first ever TNA pay-per-view at Turning Point 2004, Victory Road, 2004, to set up his eventual return at Turning Point 2004, in which he, Jeff Hardy, AJ Styles would take on the Kings of Wrestling, Jeff Jarrett, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash. That was to set up an eventual match at Final Resolution where Randy Savage would take on Jeff Jarrett with the idea that Jarrett would win and go over, and they'd move on from there. Savage didn't like that idea. But apparently there was a lot else going on. He wasn't sure he could have a singles match. He didn't like the fact that he wasn't as big as he used to be because he wasn't using steroids anymore. He wasn't sure if he was athletic enough because I think at this point he was pushing 50, if he wasn't already 50. So there was a lot of issues. Plus there was conversations with TNA and Hulk Hogan at the time, and Savage was apparently very paranoid about the whole conversation with Hulk Hogan, even though Hogan's like, dude, you know, like I got your back. Don't worry about this. Well, apparently, Matt Hardy has a fun story, or a not-so-fun story, depending on how you want to look at the situation, about Macho Man and Jeff Hardy from their brief time together in the ring. According to the article, Matt Hardy was pretty content with meeting Macho Man Randy Savage, a fan since WrestleMania 4. The Sensei of Attitude was always drawn to the eccentric superstar, as was his brother. This is from Wrestling Inc., by the way. Jeff, and when the Hardys started working with WWE, they got to meet Savage on the first day as enhancement talent in 1994. A full decade later, however, Jeff would get to be part of a legendary performer's last match ever. During the recent episode of The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, dedicated to the multi-time world champion, Matt shared a story about Savage's final television match, which took place at Turning Point 2004. It was a six-man tag that pitted the Kings of Wrestling. We already talked about that. According to Matt, the competitors were laying out the match with the charismatic Enigma made a request that Savage just couldn't accommodate. Matt says, quote, Jeff is one of those guys that likes to throw out wild ideas about matches anyway, and he had to and he said to Savage, hey, I was thinking, you want to go up to the top rope and both come off with double axe handles that you do? Savage said, I can't do that. My knees would pop out, brother. I can't do that anymore. But I love that the fact that Jeff asked Macho Man if he wanted to do a double axe handle off the top rope to the floor. Now, Marcus, I don't know if you've ever seen the six-man tag match at Turning Point. Randy Savage won by punching Jeff Jarrett in the face after he tried to roll him up, and Savage just kind of sat down and hooked the legs. It was awkward. Savage clearly couldn't move at the time. Would you have wanted to see Macho do a top rope anything?
Yeah, it would have been cool. You always want guys like that to do the classic stuff, man. But all the time is the ultimate enemy of us all, and looked like it was, like you said, seemed like it was kicking his ass, and he kind of knew it, but he wanted to come out, looking victorious, and then he got what he wanted, and I don't know how much it benefited the whole thing by the time you go back and look at it, but yeah, it would have been cool to do that. Like you said, it was cool that Jeff, because obviously, Jeff is somebody that respects guys like that, because there wouldn't be guys like him without Macho Man. Certainly, obviously, Jeff was a different variation of somebody coming off the top rope, but, Macho Man was also that guy. But I would rather him not do something and to further from injuring himself, but also not do something and coming off looking like a complete putz as well, because that's only going to bruise the ego, hurt the match, and kind of tarnish his legacy, because then he becomes the guy that used to be Macho Man. So I also think that's something that was playing in his head, so he'd rather 100% have played it safe than potentially, smudge any of his legacy. So I get it, but I don't know how, like you said, I don't know if it necessarily benefited the whole thing overall when it was said and done, because like you said, that finish, there's nothing worse than a decent, solid to great match with a crap finish.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that it was a decent or a quality match. As soon as Savage got in the ring, I think things went downhill fast from there. Probably shouldn't have ever brought him in the first place, but it is what it is. Speaking of it is what it is, Kevin Nash believes that TNA fucked up the Main Event Mafia. Now, I read the story through twice, and he doesn't go into any explanation about how he fucked up the Main Event Mafia. So it's unfortunate. But he does say that they fucked it up, man. Quote, unquote. Marcus, do you think TNA fucked up the Main Event Mafia at any point in time during their original run when it was Scott Steiner, Booker T, Kurt Angle, Sting, and Kevin Nash?
It's hard to say because that goes into the whole thing of what we saw on screen was translating what was happening off screen, where the younger guys was kind of like, what the freak is going on here? This is our company, and these guys are coming off of legendary careers, coming here kind of getting paid insane rates to kind of laud, who they are over us, and seemingly, take our spots and then treat us like we're, a bunch of do boys. So, without him going into detail, you can't really be specific, but I think the company kind of saw where things were going and would have, rather went with the guys that, they could keep invested in longer term than guys who, in a lot of instances, and this certainly might not be that true for all the people in Main Event Mafia, because obviously Kurt gave the last of his tangible wrestling years to the company, but a few, if not the rest of those guys, were there and for vacation, which they've said in one way or another. So, like I said, it's his perspective. It's all subjective, but like you said, without him going into detail, can't really be sure. But I do know that whole concept was very much running afoul with their established names like Kazarian, AJ Styles, and the like, which is why I felt so tangible when you saw the whole Frontline versus the Main Event Mafia thing on screen.
The Main Event Mafia, Fortune. Oh, the Main Event Mafia and Fortune did their thing later on in the dance, so to speak. Actually, they never did their thing. It was Fortune, and then they disbanded, and then the Main Event Mafia came back against the Aces and Eights. That's what it was.
Oh, yeah, because revamped it. Yeah, it was Sting, Joe, Magnus,
Not the greatest lineup, because Rampage Jackson was in that too. I don't think they fucked it up. I think it ran its course. I think it did its job. Ultimately, I think you were always going to struggle trying to have Sting be a heel, and I think you're always going to struggle trying to have Sting and Kurt Angle coexist as storyline villains together, because Kurt's obviously the more natural heel, and Sting's obviously the more natural face. So, like, what were you expecting to happen? I don't know. They did the best they could, I think. Speaking of best they could, coming up at the next show, it's going to be Under Siege. Fandango is going to be taking, or Dirty Dango, is going to be taking on Joe Hendry for the digital media title after it was revealed on this past week's episode of Impact that it was he who attacked Santino Marella. So I'm kind of excited about this, and I'm actually kind of shocked that they paid off the whole Santino giving the guy, what did he say? He gave the attacker a purple nurple or something like that. I forgot what it was. I forgot like what they did to mark the villain, but now Dirty Dango's missing a patch of hair on his chest, and he's going to be taking on Joe Hendry for the Digital Media Championship. I think that's a great way to go. I'm excited to see how that goes, because I think this will be a nice little match. And the card for Under Siege is coming together nicely. Apparently we don't have a run sheet on this page, so let me just pull this up. Because it's not the strongest of cards, especially with the main event, because the main event is going to be Macklin versus PCO. But Hendry and Dango are on the card. Grace and Perazzo, which I think should be your main event. Chris Sabin versus Trey Miguel, and Sabin gave a great promo on Miguel after his match this past week. Sabin talked about wanting to be the first 9-time champion in Impact history for the X Division title, and I hope he gets it. We have the 6-man tag with Shelley, Edwards, Kazarian, Gresham, Moose, and Yuya Uemura. We have a 6-man tag match with Rich Swann, Sam Callahan, and taking on the Design. Swann and Callahan need another tag team partner. We don't know who it's going to be. Trinity will take on Giselle Shaw at the event, as well will Nick Aldis taking on Kenny King. Those are their 2 big recent signings. And then you're going to have Ace Austin and Chris Bay, who they're calling ABC, versus the Subculture, which is Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster. I thought Mark Andrews was still with WWE. This will be Mark Andrews' return to the company, I guess.
Yeah, Mandrews is back.
Thankfully, he's not going as Mandrews anymore. That's one thing we can be very happy about. I hope he brings his skateboard, though. Yeah, he was released in 2022, and I don't know who or where he's wrestling besides Impact. I'm going to look that up now. Mark, what do you think of the Under Siege card?
I like it. I dig it. I got caught up on a couple episodes of Impact, but other than that, yeah, that sounds good. Look, I've appreciated. I know when he initially came in, he wasn't the highest on it, but I knew Santino was going to bring a certain entertainment flair and factor that to me has worked really well going up against some of these more serious characters and whatnot. And just the fact that they don't. Like, I appreciate the fact that the Impact is paying off a lot of the stuff that they've done. Even with the Macklin thing, they ran that for a year and a half, and they paid it off, for better for worse. And this whole thing with the Purple Nurple, and I was hoping they was going to do something with Dango, because obviously, it hasn't really done anything. But when you look at the fact that, he's come from where he's come from, successes that he's had, it kind of got brought in as a glorified sidekick, and not even that, because Santino wasn't even acknowledging him as that, but I'm pretty sure he looks at somebody like Hendry, and this is just me speculating because I don't know if it's been brought up in the story, but he looks at somebody very much like how he was, like this this entertainment guy who is now, garnering a level of success, but he's garnering a level of tangible success in terms of being a singles champion, whereas I don't think Dango ever got that in WWE. I think the biggest thing he did, correct me if I'm wrong, was beat Jericho. And they didn't even pay that off properly. Capitalize off that, I should say. Good. So he probably looks at somebody like Hendry as him but better, and that's rubbing him the wrong way. On top of him, seemingly playing a glorified do-boy for Santino, who he didn't even ask him to do. So the Purple Nurple thing is hilarious, and I'm looking forward to that match because there's going to be an opportunity for Dango to showcase some of that in-ring stuff that we already know your boy can do. Going off Hendry's matches with Moose, which I thoroughly enjoyed every time they banged. So it's going to be interesting seeing what they do. But certainly, I think, I don't know if you agree with this, but, I think the digital media title has benefited the most being on Hendry.
I would completely agree with that. I really would. I think Joe Hendry makes for a nice champion. I think it's elevated the belt a bit. I would like to see it not have to be on the pre-show all the time. I think they need to stop doing that because, specifically with Hendry, I feel like that's a guy who could be a world champion for you. So, don't mess around with that. As far as Dango goes, Jericho's loss at WrestleMania was his biggest thing. But he also had this mini feud on NXT when it became just like a minor league show, before they moved it over to the developmental side of things. He did a feud with, I want to say, EC3 involving Maxine, the Russian. Remember her? And that was mildly entertaining because there was a love triangle or a love rectangle going on at some point. It was just. It's one of those lost. I don't even know if it's lost media so much, but it's one of those under-deserved pieces of media that the WWE had that really worked. And it was when EC3 was trying to be his best Andy Samberg impersonator. So I'd like to see what Dango can do with a more robust story because I think he's got some talent. Speaking of somebody I don't think has talent, Zack Ryder. He's also known as Matt Cardona. He's bringing back the Z True Long Island Story, his old YouTube show, and he's bringing it back as Zack Ryder. And Marcus, I have to say to you, any comments?
No, I don't care one way or another. I wasn't into it when it was a thing. So him bringing it back, I mean, that's just something for him to do. Probably something that a lot of fans wanted him to do. We don't, it's not a thing for me one way or the other. I don't care. Wish the guy all the success in the world. Like I say, it's been, as I say when we always talk about this guy, or anytime we talk about this guy, I appreciate the fact that he's been able to go on the level of success that he's had post his WWE career. But I've never really been a writer or Cardona guy. So, there's no water off my back.
Yeah, I can't say that I'm exactly over the moon about it, mostly because I never liked it to begin with. And the one thing I will say is a lot of people, kind of give him undue praise for doing this YouTube thing back before it was a big thing. But people often forget that Impact was literally airing new content every day on YouTube for the longest of times before WWE even had a service on there, before Zack Ryder was even a star. So, no, I reject the historical significance of the Long Island Icy story. It got Zack Ryder over, but then again, who cares? Because he's so just flat top, man. Like, there's nothing more about him. He is as you see it, and it is uninspiring. So, that's it, though. Mark, is there any other things that caught your eye that you want to mention on this week's show?
No, that's pretty much it.
All right.
Did I see somewhere where MVP won a championship?
Not a wrestling title.
Okay.
Maybe he won a jiu-jitsu competition? I don't see anything.
Okay.
So.
That's all. But yeah, that's all for me.
It's all for me as well. That you guys can find us on the website at realnerdcorp.com, RealNerdCorp.com. We're on Twitter at NERDCORP. We are on our individuals on Twitter at Paradox Kid for Marcus. That's PARADOXKID.
That's the kid.
You can also find him on his other podcast, The True Penny Show, TRUEPENNYSHOW. Marcus, do you have anything coming up this week on The True Penny Show you want to put over?
Not as of late. Not as of right now, but we very well may be covering more GLEAT over the weekend. So, because they got some new shows, so be on the lookout for that.
More GLEAT coming your way. You can also find me on Twitter at Chad Nerdcorp, CHADNERDCORP, and on the Instagram at Chad's Photo at CHADSPHOTOHUT. For Marcus Green, I'm Chad Porto. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for giving us a chance. Remember, as always, to watch more wrestling. And Marcus, you can't see it. I'm doing the Scott Hall thing where he's about to point at somebody, but I'm doing it over and over and over and over again. And now I'm pointing at you. Take us home.
Good night, me.